Now, I would like to introduce our session chair, Neha Tiwari. Dr. Neha Tiwari, Associate Professor in Department of Computer Science and IT. The IIS University, she has more than 16 years of teaching experience. Area of interest are computer programming, database, SQL, VB, CAT, networking, Oracle Java operating system. With the permission of session chair, can I invite ma'am our first presenting, Neha ma'am? Ma'am, actually you are not audible.
Am I audible now?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so sorry because of some technical glitch, I'm not able to turn my camera on, but I hope you can clearly listen to me.
Yes, ma'am. We are
All
clearly
right.
hear you. Shall we
Thank you.
start our
So, yeah, we can start, Kushali. Let's invite the first candidate.
Yes. Mohit Sheva is here. I'm unmuting you, Mohit. Please go
Yeah,
ahead
can
with
you
the
hear me?
presentation. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can you also give me presentation rights? I
Yes.
do not have presentation
Yes,
button.
sir. I already gave you rights. So please
I do
start
not
your
have any link to share the PPT.
sorry.
I do not have the link to share my presentation.
You must be having the rights to share your screen, isn't it?
No, I do not have the share desktop or PPT button here.
The lowest bar where you find the mute and start video button, there is a screen, share screen
Yes,
option.
ma'am. Yes, that is option. We could find it.
It would pop up once you scroll over the mouse over it. Scroll the cursor over it and it will be highlighted.
No, I can see only mic, video, and then the participants list chat, shares. Okay, yeah. Now I can see.
After the chat option, you can
Yeah,
see
he's got it.
one.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, it's visible. It's very much visible.
Yeah, so a very brief introduction about myself. So my name is Mohit Sevak. I'm the first author of this paper. I have dual connections. So professionally, I am a researcher in Microsoft R&D India in the security and compliance domain. And I'm also doing my PhD from BITS Pilani. The second author, Dr. Sanjay, is the guide. And the third author is a faculty member at BITS Pilani, Goa. So this paper is about policy approximation-based deep reinforcement learning. So we'll be covering a brief on what is DRL or deep reinforcement learning, why we require policy approximation-based DRL when people have already created a lot of hypes around playing games and other things using value-based DRL. So we'll give a primer on value-based DRL. And then we'll be talking about some newer algorithms that has come in the research domain in policy-based approximation. So despite the fact that we have heard a lot about DeepMind and other companies which are experimenting with deep reinforcement learning, we have mostly seen successes around playing games. And that is where deep reinforcement learning has got a stigma that it is actually a game playing machine and doesn't have any much of a practical utility. To a large extent, this is true. There are some constraints within deep reinforcement learning, which is mostly value-based, and that is where newer algorithms that are coming or the newer research that is happening around it is mostly around policy-based reinforcement learning. And this domain is changing things a large extent. In fact, most of the newer algorithms that you would see around a self-driving car or drones or even industrial automation are mostly based around these algorithms. But before this, we'll just give a primer on the mathematics and the full positioning of policy-based DRL and where it stands in the whole objective. So on reinforcement learning is simple about an interaction of an agent, which is over here, with an environment. So the agent, while interacting with the environment, learns how it can actually maximize the reward, and you can program what things are desirable to you as rewards in that. And with this synthetic environment, the agent tries to learn a policy. So the most essential part that helps agent takes an action is called a policy over here. And once the agent learns this, we actually deploy it in real world. Now, the most essential factor that differentiates a reinforcement learning from supervised learning is the exploration part. And that is where there are different algorithms that can help agent explore the environment better. And based on that bifurcation, we have something called on policy and off policy agents, where the exploration is built inside the agent algorithm, action algorithm, or there might be a different behavior algorithm and a different action policy that the agent can actually use. Now, DRL is not a new buzzword and as such. So as compared to RL, RL was a long time back considered mostly an optimization source of algorithms, and that didn't had much room into much of the recent AI-based things that we are seeing today. And that is where the role of deep learning comes a lot. So we have seen a lot of machine learning being transformed by deep learning algorithms, but reinforcement learning couldn't actually use to a large extent a lot of innovation that was happening in deep learning. That is because there were a lot of issues because of which simply a deep learning algorithm couldn't be plugged as a learning or approximation algorithm within reinforcement learning. In fact, reinforcement learning also are basically of two types. One is model aware and one is model agnostic. So approximation based things mostly happen in model agnostic, and a lot of research initially was happening on model aware sorts of technologies. So anything that is supervised learning may not actually be reinforcement learning. In fact, these are two different things. People confuse between these things. Even unsupervised learning is not reinforcement learning. It comes under the domain of artificial intelligence that also has rule-based systems as a periphery for making agents. So you can make agents using DRL or rule-based systems. And that is why anything that you see, which is even called a robotic process automation, which automates the front end, is actually not deep reinforcement learning, or it doesn't come typically in the academically definition under the artificial intelligence. Since this paper is about policy-based reinforcement learning, so we'll explain briefly where does a policy-based reinforcement learning stands and where are the type of algorithms that we'll be talking about. So we define policy as a set of methodologies that or learnings that the agent use to take actions. And once we have, we can formulate that learning mathematically by an equation, we can form a gradient out of it. And based upon that gradient, it is very difficult to, it is mathematically intractable to differentiate to that and find a maximum or minimum or optimize that particular gradient. And that is where a lot of assumptions has come to how do you actually deal with that particular sort of a gradient. And based on that assumption, there are now two bifurcations. One is called stochastic policy gradient, and the second is called deterministic policy gradient. We're talking more about that in detail, but here is the summary. And based upon the agent's behavior, there are again two types of agents, on policy and off policy. And the moment we start interacting with these two different domains, that is where we have like a set of a lot of algorithms that is coming. But the most prominent ones here are this, which is stochastic policy gradient on policy based algorithms, and this, which is deterministic policy gradient based off policy based algorithms. These are the ones that are most popular. In fact, now these is actually taking speed more than this, but we'll be, for academic reasons, we'll be discussing this also. So now primer on value-based DRL, because this is the basis of any reinforcement learning, and that is where we'll identify the problems and we'll go to policy-based reinforcement learning. So there are three types of value functions in reinforcement learning. One is the state value, which is just called like the value function, which determines like what is the utility of an agent in being a particular state. And then the agent will try to go to that particular state where it can have the maximum utility. Then the second is called an action value, which is denoted by the letter Q, which is like if a particular state or agent take a particular action, what is the utility of that particular action? Then the third is the advantage, which is a newer form of value function that has been come up mostly around things which doesn't require much of an action. So if you have a self-driving car which is going straight, if you deal with only these two sort of values, then the car will either go left and right. It will have very difficult time keeping straight, because this value now the stability in the learning algorithm has come, because of which the third value function is also given. So any type of reinforcement learning problem, irrespective of which algorithm you are using, comes under a domain of which is called as Markov decision process. So Markov decision process is nothing but if you have a chain of events that is going on, then if the last event or the probability transition for the last event only depends upon the last state that you are, that process will be called as Markov property, and a process that use that property is called a Markov decision process. Now, with this, you can find solutions to the problem recursively. So you can go to the next state, previous state, and from previous state, you can again find transition probability to from the previous state to it, so on and so forth. Which means that now you can make solutions that are based on dynamic programming, greedy algorithm. But most of these solutions comes under the area called classical RL, which requires a complete knowledge of the environment, and in practical situation that is not possible. So that is where Bellman equations comes to the rescue. They actually simplify it by saying, okay, you don't have to do it recursively, but you can identify the state of values at one particular time, and mostly approximately it remains same within one particular iteration, so you can work with the previous set of values. Based on these, a lot of popular deep reinforcement learning algorithms that we must be knowing, deep Q learnings started coming up. There were some deficiencies in just applying the convolutional neural networks for the state identification, because of which a lot of enhancement went inside it. Those enhancements were further stabilized in double DQN, which actually had two different networks to stabilize it. And then we had something called dueling DQN, which has an advantage network because of the advantages that we actually described about this additional advantage function instead of the Q functions. But given this, because of the use of the CNNs in deep learning, a lot of way that we actually identify the state and we simplify the nonlinearities in the state became simpler. But having said so, most of the practical usages of reinforcement learning requires an action over continuous action control. So something, if I have to move, suppose a speedometer or something which is steering in a continuous manner, it is not like just turn it like in steps, but in a continuous manner, that requires very large action space. Such action space are not very conducive to be worked with any sort of direct deep learning algorithms in the deep Q learning family, because here we use a softmax function, and the moment you start having like very large number of states, then you require humongous amount of data to actually differentiate amongst those stepper functions. And the moment you try to change it into a continuous regression, then these two things doesn't work out with that. Because of which these algorithms, although were playing very good games, but in practical application or industry 4.0 applications, they were not actually performing very well. This is where the policy gradient based methods come. So at the very simpler form, we actually take called a policy is a method by which, or learning by which we take an action. And given that we're talking about Markov properties and we're talking about actions over sequences, that sequences can be called a trajectory. So the trajectory is the state of states that you have visited by taking the specific actions and the reward that you have got in that particular iteration. And if you change those iterations where you have gone, that is called a trajectory. So given the probability of the trajectory, we want to have the expectancy of the reward is called the performance function or the policy utility function for that policy, which is parameterized by the parameter theta. So this is again coming to learning function, where if you optimize this parameter theta, you can maximize your utility function or the performance function over here. So here our goal is to find those parameter vector theta, which can maximize this utility function. Now, to maximize anything, the best way we know it is to differentiate it. But in the moment we want to differentiate it, we actually get into an equation which actually is interdependent upon things. So we have this parameter theta that we want to optimize, but the probability itself is actually dependent upon this parameter theta, which becomes a very interactable mathematics. And to solve particular mathematics and simplify it, there are theorems that are given. So the first theorem was called policy gradient theorem, because that point in time it was not known that even a deterministic policy is possible. So it was just called policy gradient, not a stochastic policy.
Sorry for the interruption, sir, but you have last 1 minute to conclude your presentation.
Yeah, so I'll just So next we have like a description of all the algorithms within these families. And then we have like the most cutting edge things, which is the deterministic policy gradient. And if you just search by our name, you'll find a lot of papers and which are talking about practical applications of these algorithms, especially the TRPO and the PPO. And you can also see like the class leading benchmarks that they has provided. So in summary, we want to say that deep learning has brought a lot of a human closer to a concept called general artificial intelligence, which is like an agent start thinking like a human brain. And the specialty about a human brain is that with the same learning, you can do multiple things without actually switching your learning. That is concept is called general artificial intelligence. Up till now, general artificial intelligence was only shown in Atari games or other sort of game paper where multiple games could be played by the same learning. And that is where policy-based reinforcement learning actually ups the game by actually using these into Industry 4.0. And nowadays, there are a lot of other involvements of policy-based reinforcement learning and taking it higher into different types of domain like multi-agent reinforcement learning, multitask reinforcement learning. But having said so, like we have experienced very good results that we have got using these algorithms for different practical uses in Industry 4.0 and security forces. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah. So, Mr. Mohit, I just want to know, like, how many years has it been you have started with your research?
So I have around 15, 16 years of experience now in industry using reinforcement learning. I think have been around 4 years. I have also a book which is with the Springer Nature, which is by the same title, Deep Reinforcement Learning, Frontiers of Artificial Intelligence, in which we have also covered these things in more detail and into more formulation of different types of environments and reward functions for these.
So have you submitted any kind of similar paper which you've taken up right now recently?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of papers from academic perspective into security using deep reinforcement learning and these algorithms for malware detection and other network security. There has been other
value approximation based deep reinforcement
learning. Correct.
Yeah,
that uses
so you've just given an overview of it. Like there was
no paper was an overview paper.
Yeah. So even in this paper, I don't think you have covered any practical implementation.
Correct, because the paper limit we have actually constrained to very core crux of like how it flows as an overview.
So, but why is it so? Like, if you've done a lot on the practical front as well, why have you kept it at the overview level only?
Correct, because the basic problem that we see is that once we actually put different experiments related these papers, now that those papers doesn't has like enough room that we can actually explain about all these techniques. So the idea was we come up with a dedicated paper that we can actually use for as a reference for all the work that we have. Otherwise, the length of paper becomes so large that most of the journals and conferences actually do not accept either the overview paper or the experiment paper. So it's very difficult to combine both of them into one because this area is very new.
Yeah, I understand that. But if you have already published a paper based on an overview, you could have taken a chunk out of the entire practical work that you have managed to do so far and could have got it published. Like it would have given you a better opportunity to get the feedbacks, regarding the practical work as well.
Correct, but practical work can come only once you actually explain the mathematics. So we have put into reference a lot of different mathematics around this paper.
I got it. Yeah. So can you please just tell us a few drawbacks of policy-based reinforcement learning?
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about the advantages only.
Yeah, we have actually highlighted some disadvantages also. So in the paper, if you see the disadvantages that are highlighted are number one, it requires especially the before PPO, the TRPO ones, the users actually second order mathematics or momentum based equation to solve that particular gradient problem.
On the basis of some
very complex to actually converge into.
Yeah, I got your point. So on the basis of the convergence of local and global,
it's difficult to have converge them. Yeah. That is why you require like very large set of GPUs and data to actually converge them.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you all.
It was indeed a nice paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we have the next Presenter, please. Jaya Lakshmi KP.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'll share my screen, ma'am. One sec. Is it visible, ma'am?
It's not, but yeah, now it is.
One sec.
It is.
Yeah, okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My work is on, I've done a small comparative study between power spectral density and wavelet transform on EEG-based sleep onset detection. So I'm working in St. Joseph Engineering College in Mangaluru, Karnataka. And also my colleagues, Mahesh and Priya has also worked on this. So as you all know,
Before you start your presentation, I would like to announce that you have only 8 minutes to complete your presentation.
Okay, ma'am. I'll try my best. Thank you so much. As you all know that sleep is the main key function of the human brain, and it plays an important role in an individual's activity. So it's important for an individual to stay healthy. Like several studies points out that decent amount of sleep is critical for energy preservation. So lack of sleep, it can give a negative impact on the aspects of understanding, maybe reasoning, and vigilant attention. It makes an individual drowsy and unable to concentrate. So drivers, they often feel drowsy, or even they may fall asleep while driving. So it's a major problem. So brain signals, so we are analyzing the brain signals using EEG, and EEG detection, it helps in the prediction of drowsiness in drivers. So an electroencephalography detects the brain waves by measuring the voltage differentials across the scalp. So the waves, it vary in frequency and amplitude. So as we know that human sleep, it can be classified into 4 stages, that is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4, which is also known as REM. So these are the different categories of brain waves, where it is where we have the beta, alpha, theta, and delta. So delta is of 1 to 4 hertz, theta is 4 to 8, alpha is 8 to 12, and beta is 12 to 30 hertz. So these are the brain wave signals which is categorized. So regarding the electroencephalograph, as I've told, it mainly detects the brain waves by measuring the voltage differentials across the scalp. So if you see the EEG electrode placement, that is as mentioned in 1020 system, that is these waves are stronger near the PZ-OZ channels. So regarding the survey conducted, I have referred few literatures wherein which I got certain information regarding the EEG-based sleep detection. So these are the surveys that I have done. And here in this work, my major objective was to design a MATLAB-based system wherein which I can implement analyze the recorded sequences. So, and also my objective was to design an automatic sleep stage detection method by utilizing only that PZ-OZ channel in that EEG signal, and to implement it for the detection of the wake and stage 1 sleep. So this was the methodology wherein which EEG signal is acquired. That is, we have taken the data from physionet.org. It's an online database. So the signals from the PZ-OZ channel is being selected for further processing. The signal processing is performed using FFT and wavelet transform. Then the feature extraction was done, and the sampling frequency of the input signal, like it has been changed from 100 hertz to 128 hertz. Then it is put to the MATLAB classifier, and then weak and sleep stage was analyzed. So this is the online simulation of the EEG data. So where in which I have used that, we have done it using the EDF browser. So on the right side, you can see that PSG data of the subject, like that is one in the EDF browser, one subject number was there. So that is the PSG data that we have collected. So this is done in the wake and sleep signal, that is done in the MATLAB. So you can see the samples versus amplitude signal that is mainly done for the wake stage as well as stage 1 sleep. And this shows the signal processing part, which is done using two methods. One is using FFT and the other one using the PSD. So here you can see in the figure that this is the input EEG signal, and there is awake with corresponding subbands here. And this is the stage 1 input EEG signal with the corresponding subband. And method 2 was using the wavelet transform, that is we have used the Debussier's filter here. The sampling frequency which was taken is 128 hertz, and the decomposition level was 4. So D2 is the beta subband, DT is alpha, D4 is theta, and A4 is the delta subband. So in case of feature extraction that we have done, so from power spectral density, these are the equations where energy is calculated using this particular formula as well as the entropy. So regarding the feature extraction from wavelet transform, that these are the equations for the, in case of wavelet transforms. This is the range of values that we obtained, one from the PSD, that is power spectral density, that is set 1, and this is the down one is the data that we got it for set 2, that is for the wavelet transform method. So we have featured, got extracted the feature using energy, entropy, and mean. And in case of wavelet
Sorry for
transform,
the
yes.
interruption, ma'am, but
Yeah.
you have last 2 minutes for your presentation. Please try to conclude it on time.
Okay, ma'am. So then we have the finite summation and the entropy. These are the data that we got for all, like theta, delta, alpha, and beta. So these are the MATLAB classification learners, which we have, that is decision tree, discriminant analyze, SVM, logistic regression, nearest neighbors, naive Bayes, and ensemble classification. So this is the results, like the accuracy results that we got for different models. And on the right side, you can see the misclassification cost for each. So this indicates the decision tree. This the gray is for linear discriminant method, and yellow is for naive Bayes, and this is for SVM. And this is for KNN based classifier, and this is for ensemble. So this is the accuracy level. Accuracy, you can see that it is more for decision based tree, and the next it is for ensemble. In case of misclassification cost, it is very less for the decision tree, and very much, it's more for linear discriminant. So these are the results that we got using the first set 1 and the set 2 predictions. So in certain cases, you can see that there is a misclassification where in which wake, we are getting it as sleep. And in both the cases, we are getting like only very few misclassifications. So it shows the output of the trained models against the actual state of the subject. So out of 20 states, model trained using set 1 has an accuracy rate of 85%, and set 2, we got an accuracy of 95%. So these are the references. Thank you. Any questions, ma'am?
Yeah, so Ms. Jayalakshmi, could you please just help me in explaining that how the inferences drawn from your work are going to contribute to something?
Hello?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, ma'am. Can you please tell me, like repeat it, ma'am? I'm not able
Yeah,
to
sure. So I just want to know, like, how the major inferences drawn out of your research work are going to contribute.
I guess, ma'am, in the future, at least we could have, we can make some sensor-based device or instrument, so that we can choose the best method to for the classification purpose. This is just a comparative study whether with which one to choose the
Yeah,
best.
because a lot of work has already been
Yes,
done.
it has already been done. Yes, correct, ma'am.
Yeah,
This is
and
just
it's
a
been a
base.
decade, you know. Yeah, so
Yeah.
like People have been comparing wavelength transform and Fourier transform, and
Yeah, ma'am.
many other
Yeah.
comparison work has been
It's going on. Yes, ma'am.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's going on, and it's been going on for
Already
the
been
past
done. Yes, ma'am.
decade. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So like it's 2020 and people have been doing it for past I would say 10 or 15 years.
Yes.
So what made you think about doing a comparative study on this and not taking something which would be a step ahead than what has already been done?
Like I thought, like I'll scratch. I mean, start from the scratch, ma'am. Like
But
then.
whatever we are reiterating has already been done, and we could have saved a lot of
Okay.
time if we had started from
Yes.
something which
Yes.
has already been done. We could have taken it from there, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
just a
Yes.
suggestion.
Yes. Yes. I know,
So,
ma'am. Like I'll look
yeah,
into it, ma'am. Sure. I'll
yeah. And
consider.
one more thing, like, do you have some common base for comparison or some kind of parameters which were there in common, and why you opted for FFT and WT only? Why not any other,
No.
technique?
Uh,
Yeah.
it's like from the literature, I thought like I'll go for these two methods, ma'am. FFT
No,
and
but there need to have some logical, valid reason behind doing that. So you
okay.
need to have something strong, reason behind doing that. So
Okay.
because that's something which is going to validate your research work, isn't it?
Yes.
Very,
Yes,
very
ma'am.
important. So
Yes. Yeah.
please look for some
Yes, ma'am.
kind of, I would say, strong, authentic,
Yeah. Yeah.
a work or reasons to validate what you have done,
Okay. Okay, ma'am. I'll
right?
sure, ma'am. Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's call the next candidate, Madhuri Palod.
She is not here, ma'am.
All right, ma'am.
We'll skip it, and I'll go for the Abdul Hafiz. I'm unmuting him.
Abdul Mueed Hafiz, right?
Yes, Muhit
Okay,
Hafiz.
sure.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I'm present, ma'am.
So you can start with your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Let me share this.
Sure.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can. It's visible.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, hello all. Welcome, respected panel and dear participants. I wish you a good afternoon. And I'll straight away come to my presentation. I understand I'm about some 8 to 10 minutes, so I'll make good use of the time. Myself, Abdul Mueed Hafiz. I'm assistant professor at Institute of Technology, University of Kashmir, Srinagar, and I'm going to give a presentation based on deep learning. And in this paper, I'll be discussing about digit image recognition with an application. It's extrapolated from OCR, and it says sample task, a thing that is taken, which is used to evaluate deep classifiers in certain areas, and it builds up to computer vision. If you're successful in small tasks like these, you can build up to higher level tasks like computer vision in large scale applications and other devices also. Now I'll be talking about use digit image recognition, which is image recognition OCR of digit images using an ensemble of one versus all deep network classifiers. Now we know about deep learning, we know about deep network classifiers like convolutional neural network classifiers. But one thing which I would like to emphasize is that recently ensemble classifiers have not recently, it has been there for some time, but the technology evolves and ensemble classifiers have come to fore, and we are using ensemble classification. There have been ensembles of other classifiers like different ensembles have been there, and deep network convolutional network ensembles have also been growing lately. Now one area which has not been touched so far is one versus all deep network classifier. It has been researched at a moderate level. One versus all, what's it and how is it relevant to the work in hand? I will straight away start. So the problem statement first. In multi-class deep network classifiers, the burden of classifying samples of different classes is put on a single classifier. So if you have a multi-class classifier, which classifies, let's say, the simplest task at hand, but one of the simplest tasks at hand, other than binary classification, is 10-digit classification. There are 10 classes. Now the entire burden is put on classifying 10 classes on a single classifier. What happens? As a result, the optimal classification accuracy is not obtained. Also, training times are large due to running the CNN training on single CPU GPU. Evolving from that. However, it is known that using ensembles of classifiers increases the performance. Also, the training times can be reduced by running each member of the ensemble on a separate processor. So we can reduce the training time and we can increase the performance of a multi-class single classifier by using an ensemble. Like I have said, we can train each member of the ensemble on separate GPU, and then we can have a faster training. We know training on millions of images like ImageNet and so on and so forth. Big database are coming up, massive database are coming up, and deep learning itself feeds on large amounts of data. So this time can be reduced significantly, and we can increase the performance also, as I'll be demonstrating in the results. Ensemble learning has been used in the past for traditional methods to a varying extent and is a hot topic. With the advent of deep learning, ensemble learning has been applied to the former as well, to deep learning. However, an area which is unexplored and has potential is one versus all OVA deep ensemble learning. Why ensemble learning? So I touched upon this. I'll be going a bit literature survey. Now, this paper one, which is in the references by Mr. Dong, presents an introduction of ensemble learning approaches. They conducted research in two makes used weak multi-class ensembles which combine outputs of different layer-based transfer conditions. And now I won't be going to the literature survey also due to paucity of time. But one important ensemble which has not been investigated so far is one versus all ensemble. The mission to use a deep learning OVA, one versus all ensemble approach for digital image recognition is the mission. By doing this, an effort has been made to increase the classification accuracy of deep neural networks on the classical digital image recognition. We are trying to improve the digital image recognition task. I understand this is not a very versatile or a state-of-the-art thing, but it's one of the benchmarks. If you have to start to build a new technology, you start tracing it back, you start working on simple basic tasks, and then you take it to a level which is state-of-the-art and which is really massive and huge. But you start by the simpler things, you start by the basic things, test the technology on basic things, then you move on to advanced things. So digital image recognition is one of those basic things, a very viable and a very important benchmark for a classifier also in some terms, if you would agree. Okay. Now you can see here on the left, I have a single multi-class CNN classification. You have a sample, you give it to a CNN which is multi-class, and you have the decision. The decision could be there could be a decision for binary decision or an n-class decision. It's a classifier. And on the right hand, you have a deep ensemble classification. Here you use many CNNs. You feed the sample to each of the CNNs, same sample, which is the test image, of course, after training that is. You feed the sample image to different CNNs, and the CNNs have some sort of a voting mechanism. And after the voting, the decision is taking that which CNN classified, and the tag, the tag, the parenthood of the classifying with the maximum voting, with the maximum voting share, which has CNN which has maximum voting share. The tag of that CNN is given to the sample, and the sample is said to have been classified by that CNN. So this is a simple scenario. Now this is our proposed approach. We use the test digit image, we give it to OVA one versus all classifier one. There are about n one versus all classifiers, and each gives us a predictive score. We use a maximum scoring approach, and that gives us the predictive category. Now what OVA, but I would like to say one thing about OVA is that in OVA, we train each of the classifiers by taking in training, we take one class as the active class, and all of the rest of the classes as the another class. So we have basically in OVA, we have each of the CNNs is a binarily trained CNN. For example, this CNN, first CNN, it will have what you call as the training data will consist of one class of digit 0 as one class, and digits 1 to 9 as the other class. Then CNN2, this will have the training data of digit 0 and 2, 1, 2, 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 as one class, and digit 1 as the other class, and so on and so forth. That's about OVA. These are the CNNs we have used in the study. This is, you will see that the convolution batch normalization, ReLU, rectifier linear unit, and max Folliers have been repeated almost till here. Then you have The left hand is for the BCCNN, something we call, for our relevance, we have given this name. It's a binary classification CNN, and the right one is for MCNN, which is multiple classification CNN. The MCNN, this one is the normal thing. We will have this always in the conventional scenario. This will have a softmax and output classification layer of 10. There will be 10 neurons for 10 classifications, and here we have used a binary classification mechanism for our each ensemble member, each CNN in the ensemble will be using this CNN structure, and this has been compared with multi-class classification CNN, which is on the right. Now the data sets used, the digit image data sets used were the MATLAB digit image data set. It has 10,000 instances. The USPS, United States Postal Service digit image data set having 11,000 instances. The MNIST modified NIST digit image data set having 70,000 instances. And these are the results. Here, our baseline has not been other, we have not compared as such the work with. There's not a tabular comparison with other works. We use the baseline, the deep network itself for comparison. Why did we do this? We did this because the baseline itself can vary. You can have AlexNet. We use AlexNet. You can have the baseline. Then you can have an AlexNet OVA ensemble. You can use a ResNet as the baseline. You can have a ResNet OVA ensemble. You can use an InceptionNet or a mobile net or whatever is there as a baseline, and you can have an OVA ensemble of the same CNN. So we took AlexNet as the baseline, and we improved the baseline by comparing the results with the OVA ensemble. You'll see here for the first thing, which is the MATLAB digit data sets. We first trained the MCN on 1,000 instances, means 100 instances of each of the 10 digits and 50 instances of each of the 10 digits, and then we had accuracy of, these are epochs E, we had accuracy of 94%. Validation set size was 500, testing set size was 500. Then we increased it slowly, and you will see that usually for with increasing set of training data, 99.8% accuracy has been reached by BCNN ensemble, which is an OVA ensemble, our proposed ensemble. And for the baseline, which is the the conventional deep network, which has which is the conventional deep network MCNN, it is 99.70. For USPS again, we have here a higher score, and for MNIST we have again here we did not get a good score here. But what we did then with MNIST was that we modified the structure of the CNN, and what we did was, it was observed that if an 8 neuron fully connected layer was inserted before the binary layer while retaining all other layers in the network, the recognition accuracy of the modified BCNN ensemble was higher. So after this modification in the architecture of the each member of the ensemble, we got a higher accuracy. This was 97.75 for MCNN, which is the baseline classifier, and for modified BCCNN ensemble, we got accuracy of 97.8%. Then in MATLAB and USPS, we exhausted all of the data, but here some, MNIST is a large comparatively.
Sir,
yes.
Sorry for the interruption, but you have last 13 seconds.
Okay.
30 seconds to complete your presentation.
Okay, ma'am. So
Miss Arzu and Sanithya, kindly check your chat box.
Okay. So the MNIST was then used to the maximum extent 40,000 and 8,000. 8 is 16, and 40 is 56. So out of 60,000, we used 56 images, and you will see here that the modified BCCNN ensemble got an accuracy of 98.5%, and accuracy of MCNN, the conventional classifier, was 98.4875. Then the conclusion is that using ensembles of one OVA deep network for multi-class classification is a promising area. To the best of our knowledge, is the first work to use an OVA ensemble of CNN.
Okay, Mr. Hafiz, I would stop you here.
Yes, ma'am.
My major question would be regarding the data set that you have taken, right? The size of the instances was pretty high, like 70,000 or 10,000. there were 3 cases, right? So 3 different data sets of varying instances. But when we look at from the perspective of one versus all multi-class classification, it's evident that we face a big challenge when we have to deal with large data sets which
Yes,
have
ma'am.
a high number of class instances.
Yes, ma'am.
So I am not I wouldn't say I'm not convinced, but yeah, I have a kind of like it's a bit difficult for me to digest the kind of accuracy that you have got after the execution of things. So after experimentation, whatever results you have come up with are uh, really surprising, because it's going against the theory that we have learned so far. So I'm really still not convinced that how were you able to deal with this large data set having such a...
From the, can I answer?
Yeah, sure, you can.
Yes, ma'am. From the onset of the deep learning thing, the major concern was that the processors and the hardware will be overloaded. But as technology improved, we gradually made more accommodation for large and larger data sets. So I think it's only a matter of time before more and more data can be
But then I would
concentrated.
say you must then specify it somewhere that what kind of hardware and software specifications you've used, that you've taken such a high large amount of class instances based data set. So you
No, no,
must...
actually, it's not that high. I mean,
Huh?
these are very small images. These are about 28 by 28 pixel images. So the amount of memory which they use is not that high. Of course, on
But
my
the...
current hardware, it was a challenge. But for a GPU,
Mhm.
I did not even use a GPU map. For a
Mhm.
GPU, it won't be a big task. Yes, but if you go
Mhm.
for a big image, 800 by 600 pixel image, or 2 to 3 by
No,
2
that's okay,
image.
but the number of instances is very high, isn't it? Like 70,000, 10,000. It's quite a big number.
Yes, but the
So,
results are there for anyone. I can share the results with you if they want.
no, that's okay. Results are absolutely fine. But the only question that you can face somewhere regarding your work would be on the data set itself,
Yes, ma'am.
right? So
Yes.
I would say that you please have uh, a strong justification ready for your work, like regarding the data sets, I would say, right? Rest is fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So we can call the next participant, the next presenter.
Yes, ma'am. Shilpa Sharma.
If in case she's not ready, we can call up the next one.
Ma'am, she is ready.
Okay,
Yes,
all right. I
she is
couldn't
here.
hear from her, so all right.
All right. Shilpa, ma'am, you have to unmute yourself. I already you right. Charlie.
You're not audible.
Shilpa,
Is
are
it
you there? Yes,
she's
ma'am.
not audible. So is it possible for us to call up
Yes,
the
ma'am.
next
Yes.
presenter? Yeah.
I will unmute Harleen Kaur. Shilpa will give you chance at the end of the presentations. Once all presentations are done, we'll give you chance. Harleen,
Yes, ma'am. Am
please
I
go
audible?
ahead with your presentation.
Okay, ma'am.
And you have just 8 minutes to complete your presentation, including conclusion.
Okay, ma'am. I will try my best. Good afternoon, ma'am. My topic name is load balancing and its challenge. Firstly, I define some abstract. Ma'am, I am audible?
Yes, yes, you are. But your
Okay, ma'am.
voice is quite creaky.
Actually, network problem.
Okay. Okay.
Hello?
Kindly speak loudly so we can
Okay,
hear
ma'am.
you clearly.
Okay, ma'am. Firstly, I define the abstract. In abstract, cloud computing is a cutting-edge state of the art
I would
technology.
request Ferline to start with the introduction or maybe the literature survey. That
Okay,
would be
ma'am.
better.
Okay, ma'am. I define the introduction. In introduction, I will define the cloud computing and about load
You
balancing.
start with the literature survey because there's no point in discussing about the cloud computing.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah.
In literature survey, I have sub points. First is a load balancing in cloud computing, and this load provides all type of service like software, platform, or even infrastructure. Vast number hosts provide it with numerous requests in every second. It is an important factor while assigning load to the resources. Normally, virtualizations try to balance the load, but still not able to cater all the load, causing over or underutilization of the resources. In next slide, I define the diagram of load balancing model. Some users are put send request on the cloud service provider, and that send request on the load scheduling algorithm. And we have balanced the load in different virtual machines, virtual machine 1 to virtual machine 4. And next is a comparative analysis of the various load balancing algorithms. In this, the load balancing can be performed in different scenarios. The details approach used in different load balancing algorithms in various simulation environment in given load.
तेरा देख तो.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry for the interruption, but I'm not hearing properly. Can you please speak?
No, that's okay. It's audible. Like we can connect
Okay,
with the subject. Yeah.
Okay,
So carry
sorry.
on, Harleen. No,
Okay,
that's okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, ma'am. In this table, we are defining some algorithms and with author name or some prospects. First is a Wala Haseen. In 2017, in this paper, we describe the new algorithm that is based on the behavior of honeybee for load balancing. In this, honeybee algorithm compared with the ant colony or different like round robin algorithm.
Harleen, you please come to the next third or fourth slide, I would say.
Ma'am, on classification?
No, like skip this one as well.
Performance metrics?
Yeah, I mean, what are the solutions that you have provided? Are there any solutions, or you just okay? So you just tell me about the future work. Like you've said that there are some.
Okay, ma'am. In future, we have hold the more than 50 requests on different virtual machines, like 100 to 50 requests we handle on one virtual machine. And
come to the conclusion slide. I cannot see it.
On conclusion, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. In this
okay,
review, in this review, we have discussed how various and heuristic and meta-heuristic techniques to be counter load balancing in different environments. Mostly, we have worked on CloudSIM, and all the algorithms are considering different metrics, load balancing to improve the quality of services. And the challenge described could help in future regarding factors to be taken under consideration for improve the load balancing. In next slide, I define some references and thank you.
Go to the reference slide.
This one, ma'am.
So are you a research scholar, Harleen?
Yes, ma'am, I'm MTech.
How long has it been that you got yourself enrolled?
Ma'am, last 6 months.
All right.
Yes.
So I would suggest you a few things, right? It's
Okay,
just a kind of comparative analysis that you've done through review of literature.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would give you a few, I would give you certain key points to keep in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of work has already been done on this, right?
Okay.
Issues, and even people have suggested some solutions for it in cloud scenario with proper experimentation.
Okay.
So you please take those good papers in consideration, form the base of your research accordingly, so that you can come up with something promising, right?
Okay.
So whatever you have managed to cover here will not contribute much to you in your work. So are you going to work in the major is cloud area, I think, right? You'll be working
Yes, ma'am.
in cloud scenario. And have you fixed up your mind to work on load balancing issues only, or you still open for some different things? आपने
Ma'am, I
सिर्फ
will
load
work on some.
balancing का सोचा है, या you have a few more areas or a few more issues in your mind?
Ma'am, actually load balancing का ही सोचा था.
Okay, so I would suggest that you please go through the papers.
Yes,
In
ma'am.
implementation has been done, solutions have been provided for the same issues that you're talking about. The papers that you have covered for this presentation are they won't contribute much to you in your work, I would say, right?
Okay, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can we please call up the next presenter?
Yes, ma'am. MR Sharma.
Hello everybody, can you please see my screen?
Not yet, sir.
Can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
So what do I do now?
You just have to start with the screen share. There is an option appearing at the lowest bar
Yes.
of the window, of the Zoom window.
Yeah, I'm trying to locate that.
Sure.
Yeah, now?
Yes, it's visible now.
I'm Commander Sharma. I'm a retired officer from Indian Navy, and my paper topic is Transition of Ex-Servicemen from Military to Civilian Society, Challenges and Prospects in Reintegration. My co-authors are Dr. Dheeraj Jain and Dr. Vijayta Sharma. Scope of presentation is introduction, then objectives, and then reintegration process for a soldier after retirement, methodology, findings and analysis, conclusion. Introduction is...
I would request you, sir, to please move to the objectives part.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to, I want to go to my objectives. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We discuss the objectives and then we can take the
investigate. Sorry. I was over speaking. Can you repeat what you are trying to say?
Sure. I'm saying let's first discuss the objectives and then we can move to the methodology part.
Okay. Objective of the study is investigate the reintegration challenges faced by the Indian ex-servicemen. identify and examine the factors helpful in reintegration process that I call enablers, and identify and examine the factors hindering the reintegration process, which I have named as barriers. So definition of reintegration, it has been taken from some authors and also from from dictionary. It is organizing psychological and social traits to form a harmonious and whole personality.
So let's move on to the methodology part.
Okay. This is the process chart which I want to show because it's very pertinent to this presentation. This is the active serviceman. After retirement, he becomes an ex-serviceman. At that time, he needs to understand the changed circumstances and need to reintegrate back into the civilian society. For that, he needs enhanced education, employment, home, money to meet bulk requirements. These I have called hardware part. And then he reaches a stage called resettlement. Now, resettlement is the first milestone for him. Then mental health, appreciation, harmony in family, having friends and associates, having a good quality of life, social empathy, which when these all factors are in harmony and in equal measure, then he comes to a stage which is called reintegration. He reintegrates in the civilian society. Methodology, these studies were set up in India and concerned Indian ex-servicemen, comprised retired personnel below officer's rank, means soldiers from Indian Army, Navy and Air Force. Universe of study was 27 lakh, which are the retired personnel strength in India. Sampling frame was 12 lakhs, calculated on the basis of that people retire below 40 years of age and they will have a productive life of about 20 years, and 60,000 soldiers are retiring every year, so it makes it a 12 lakhs sampling frame. Sampling size was calculated at 385 at alpha at 0.05. Responses received were 411. Study did not include the commissioned officers because they are not a homogeneous group with the soldiers. These are my findings, and this is the respondents from different states of India. So we can see that about 27 states have been represented, and this makes it a pan-India survey. Age profile at the time of joining service, about 91% soldiers are below 21 years of age, and balance 9% are about 21 years of age, showing that the soldiers join forces at a very young age. At the time of retirement, about 47% soldiers are in the age group of 30 to 35, and about 31% are between 36 to 40 years. We can say that about 77 to 78% of the soldiers retired before they turn 40 years of age. It means they need to have a second career.
Sir, can I ask a question to you?
Hello?
Yeah, can I ask some
Yes,
questions?
Please. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Sure. So where did you get this data from?
This data is from government sources and from the responses I got from the respondents, where I have asked them to state at which age they have retired. And this has been calculated from my survey report.
All right. So some data has been taken from the survey that has already been done, and yourself has conducted some survey.
These figures are mainly from the responses of my survey responses.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So, and how have you taken out the percentage and all? What have you used?
I have used software. That is, if you want to know the name, it is Survey Gizmo, which does the analysis, tabulation, and it gives you the figures.
All right. So, can we come to the conclusion part, sir?
Yes.
Like
yes,
what are the major inferences?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come to the conclusion.
Sure.
This is one factor. In fact, you have not given me my allotted time because
no, that's okay. You can carry on. No, that you can carry on.
Because,
I was just
then that the link is broken. then there is no point in going further.
No, sure, you can carry on. There's no issue with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was coming that soldiers retire at very young age. About 78% of them retire before they turn 40. Then I have given here education profile because education is directly linked to the job. They have to take their jobs. So if we see here, we find that matriculates and 10+2, they form about 85% of the soldiers entering the service. And in service, they increase their education. So here we find that the graduates have risen to this number has risen to 26%. Postgraduates have risen to 25% from 1.2 to 9. Earlier it was 9% and 1.2%. This is the profile that 10% people were from Army, 62 were from Navy, 27% from Air Force. And this is the important topic here is that this 34% people remain unemployed, and these are the ones I'm mostly talking about who find difficulty in reintegration. Now factors which help get employment are 34% higher education, followed by merit and networking, reservation 21%, and then Army education training 13%, and others on minor about 5% through other sources. Now enablers I have found in reintegration process are employment, which I discussed earlier. This is the very crucial and critical, and we also found that hardware part I was talking about, support from family members and relatives, availability of funds for meeting bulk requirements which they get at the time of retirement, having civilian friends and associates, plus active participation in community functions. People who were doing this, they were easily reintegrated. Personal attributes and social skills of an individual are very important. Willingness and making conscious effort to merge in the society. Challenges or barriers were cultural differences between military and civilian society, because soldiers are generally all through their lives, they are isolated from civilian society. The Army has a totally different culture and different society, so there is a cultural difference. Unemployment is the major barrier. Lack of higher education and civilian job skills. It prevents them in getting jobs, and plus military skills are not recognized. Then limited seats are available in pre-release courses, and pre-release courses themselves are outdated. Ineffectiveness of resettlement agency is a big barrier, and non-implementation of reservation rules.
Sorry for the interruption, sir, but you have last 1 minute to conclude your presentation.
Yeah. And government focuses on recruitment and not on after retirement situation, then it is, they have to fend for themselves. Conclusion is that employment crucial for resettlement integration, higher education and reservation help ESM get job. ESM without job face serious problems of existence, resettlement and integration. So I suggest that enforcement of job reservation rule should be strictly followed by all organizations. Improvement in the education qualification of ESM should be done within the service or last year of their service. Job getting courses should be included in pre-release training courses. Military trades and education should be equated to valid civilian qualification, and mental health of retirees should be evaluated, and counseling should be provided where needed. I have finished. Thank you very much. Any question, please? I am available for answering.
No, sir. I am like contented with the kind of inferences that you have drawn out of it. In fact, I was a bit inquisitive in knowing about the inferences which were drawn. So that's why I had interrupted you in between. But yeah, it's very much clear and interesting as well. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, this topic was very dear to my heart. So after retirement, I read it. Yeah. So thank you for providing me a platform to present it.
Pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
For very nice presentation. Thank you for your presentation, sir. Now I request Apurva Kulkarni. Yes, Apurva. Please go ahead with your presentation. And la you have just 5 to 6 minutes to complete your presentation. Please try to
Okay.
complete it on time.
Yeah, let me know once you see my screen.
Yes, yes, it is visible. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So my project title is Efficient Data Accountability and Security Enhancement using Blockchain Technology. So basically, we are implementing data security and accountability using blockchain technology. So our project is related to accountability of a person's data who are using any type of service. So accountability here refers to the responsibility of data and its ownership. So, and the security here refers to the data security and not the network security, which means that the data should not be tampered. Yeah. So this is the agenda of the presentation. So first of all, I would like to introduce the blockchain contains is a chain of blocks, but not in the traditional sense of those words. Like when we say the words like block and chain in the context, we are actually talking about the digital information stored in the public database. So blockchain contains data, timestamp, previous hash, and hash which is called a header. So we will go to the next slide, which is motivation. So as we can see here, the data is transferred over the internet and a single server handles that data. So if the single server crashes, then there will be lot of data, loss of data or data breach. So as we can see here, the corona pandemic has shaken the roots of all the healthcare organizations. So in such a situation, like it has been difficult for them to attend, so patients to attend physically, and it is equally difficult and risky for the patients to travel to the locations of the hospital. So and as well as similarly, the patient's mentality is shifting towards the hiding the problems from the society, which is resulting in a silent growth of the pandemic. So here we can see the lack of accountability and security. Uh, I will go to the next slide. So these are the papers which we had referred. If the time permits, then we can just uh, go for this at the last. So I would come on the research gaps. So these are the research gaps which we are going to work upon: accountability, security, and blockchain. So this is the problem statement. Problem statement is to develop a remote healthcare system using blockchain as a service framework for preserving patients' accountability and data security. So here the objectives are to develop BSS as a framework for healthcare system to avoid single point failure, to provide traceability, to avoid tampering of data, and to maintain accountability. So some of the other as we have discussed in the introduction, for the pandemic has shaken the roots of the healthcare system. So for this purpose, we are developing a service which can be integrated with any kind of data management systems. So some of the examples are here where it can be integrated like college, banks, tolls, etc. So right now there is a current most spoken topic of the student credit database. So in this system of new education policy, which contains a database for the credits of the students which they have studied in their courses. So in this system, we can integrate a service which can provide security and accountability of the database. Okay, so this is the next slide, blockchain as a service. So blockchain is a third-party creation and management of cloud-based networks. So I will go directly to the proposed system. So in this diagram, we are avoiding the central server and central storage and using the blockchain instead. So this satisfies all our objective. So I will go to the architecture. So as we have discussed the problem statement that we are implementing a BS for remote healthcare system. So here we have shown the healthcare system in the inner circle and BAS as an additional functionality to the healthcare system. So the users outside the circle are the patients and the one inside are the doctor. So the remote healthcare system is the channel or system on which both of them can communicate with each other. And the BAS is the service which provides the functionality of data security and accountability. So here the BAS does not interfere in working of the system and nor it changes it. So this is the diagram for BAS in which keys are generated from the data blocks and stored in the blockchain on the cloud.
So the data which the keys are generated is stored on the remote healthcare system cloud, as blockchain can only save hash values and the data and not the whole data. So these are some of the technologies which we have used for our project. These are some of the technical specifications. So I would like to go to algorithm 1. So here we have initialized a variable current hash, then we apply SHA on the user file.
I would request you please skip the algorithm part and
Okay.
move to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah. So system flowchart. So here we have so concluded all the algorithms which we have used before. So these all algorithms are used here: verifying the user, adding a record in the common blockchain, and adding a data block in the blockchain. So this is the project structure which we are using the files, and finally we are comparing the keys. So we are using the proof of work here.
Can you
So
please come to the experimentation part if you have done some?
Yeah, so we have taken some corona reports, and from that we have generated the keys, and user generated key, final generated keys, and we have tampered some of them, and after that we are again generating the keys, and we are comparing the keys, and then we are getting the final output. So these are some of the snapshot of those where we can see keys are generated for the files. So keys are stored in the common blockchain. So here the user verifies before and after file tampering. So here we get the conclusion as user verified or user not verified. So this is the comparative analysis. What we have taken the algorithms, and we have done the comparative analysis. So it is observed that the system we are proposing, it has accountability. So cost is also less. Here the electronic health records are used, and proof of work is used. So cost is less due to the blockchain as a service which we are using. I would like to conclude this presentation by saying that blockchain is playing a vital role in many applications to provide security of the data. The main aim of the system is to enhance accountability and security of the data stored on the cloud. So blockchain has been proved to be a very efficient technique to achieve this aim. And this has become a 100% tamper-proof system, which enhances the security of the patient's data. Yeah, thank you.
So are you over with your research work?
Sorry?
Are you over with the research work?
I'm not actually, I'm not able to hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So the question is, Apurva, are you enrolled in PhD?
No, I have just now completed my post-graduation, and this was the post-graduation work which I have done.
Okay, that's the difference. All right. So have you gone through the kind of implementation, security implementations that we have in blockchain? Have you actually gone through any such project or any of those papers in which it has been implemented?
Yes, but I have preferred the papers which are implemented, and I can see the similar like accountability, security. I have taken those papers, and blockchain papers also are there, but the implementation was built different in that. So this is not yet implemented.
I can understand that because you have done PG and you're not a PhD research scholar, but the kind of inferences that you've drawn and the kind of implementation that you've shown, I could not even connect with the kind of system specifications that you had given, like you've mentioned putty over there. So we do not mention such things. I mean, you just have to name the major platforms available, right? What have you used for the implementation thing? So I would say like for PG work, it's fine. But if you're aiming to go for research, further research work related with this topic or the domain, I would say you'll have to have a strong, ground work done before you take it up, right? So
Yeah,
that is
sure.
just a
Definitely.
suggestion.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sure.
And please refine the kind of system specifications that you've given and the kind of work that you have done and proposed, that what your conclusions are. So you
Sure,
have to
yeah,
refine it a bit even at PG level, right? Okay,
right,
thank you
right.
so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
all right. So I think it's
Um,
over
Uh,
now.
no, no, no. Uh, Shilpa Sharma is there.
Okay, fine. She could not connect that
Yes.
time. All right.
Shilpa is gone.
Is she able to join now?
Yes. I already unmuted her.
She has some issue even now. I doubt that she'll be able to give the presentation.
Shilpa, if you have any query, kindly chat me.
You can text, you can type in the chat window, Shilpa, if in case you have any problem.
Am I audible? Shilpa, you are not audible. Only check
You
your audio and go ahead with your presentation, Shilpa.
Shilpa, are you using the microphone? Like if in case you're using the microphone, I would request you to change the settings of the hardware that you're using, because by default it's stereo mix. You have to switch to microphone mode, and you can do so by clicking on the up arrow of next to the mute button.
Ma'am, can we
Are
give
you
her?
audible now?
Yeah, it's better now, Shilpa. Now
Oh, thank God.
Okay.
And thank you,
You
ma'am,
can
for giving me your
lower
chance.
your head. Shilpa.
you can begin with your presentation. Please start with your screen share.
Yes.
Yes.
Shilpa, Shilpa,
My
please
screen is
remember
visible
that
now?
you have, okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
it is
visible.
visible, but please listen to me. You have
Yeah, Shilpa,
last 5 minutes,
Okay.
okay? Including QA, ma'am, right?
Okay.
yeah,
Including
Shilpa, you
question
just
answer.
come to the so you just come uh, to the slide where you have mentioned the objectives or some work that has been
Absolutely
done.
right, ma'am.
Actually, ma'am, this is a review paper I have submitted. So I'm going to just, I will take only 2 to 3 minutes, right?
Sure.
Actually, you are giving me a second chance, so thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to present on this topic, recent development, challenges, and future scope of voice activity detection schemes. Due to this COVID-19, all we have shifted to the virtual platform online, right? From the offline to online. Now we have a virtual presentation. So here, voice activity detection works a lot. See, every time we are facing a problem, whenever we are going to communicate ourselves, there's a noise. And now how to remove that noise? So voice activity detection schemes are going to be used, right?
You please come to the comparison part, because I would point out one thing, Shilpa, here, that
Yes.
such comparisons have already been done years back. We can find very good papers regarding voice activity detection, and they have done a comparative analysis work through experimentation. So my first question to you would be, have you done some experimentation regarding your work?
No, yet, ma'am. Just I
So
have
it's
submitted.
just a literature review,
Yes.
right? So
Right,
you
ma'am.
just come to the references, then I would say, because see, there is no point in repeating the things. I would just give you some key points that some takeaways that you can keep in your mind. So are you enrolled in PhD?
Ma'am. Actually, ma'am,
Yes.
many work has been done on this, no doubt, but that
No,
is on the
Shilpa, I'm just asking you,
supervised.
have you been enrolled in
Yes.
PhD?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and are you in your initial year?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So there is so much scope to do something in this. I would just ask you to show me the references that you have taken for your work.
Ma'am, here in this PPT, I haven't added that. I have just removed because.
All right. So there is just one suggestion to you then. See, you'll feel that you have not been given time to express yourself or the work, but I would say that there is no point in doing that. Why? Because a lot of work has already been done like 7 years back, and such kind of comparison analysis has been done using voice activity detection, right? And moreover, you have not done it practically, you have done it through literature review, right? So I would give you two things to keep in mind. Please include last 7 years papers for your work for such comparison, right? Am I audible, Shilpa?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, use last 7 years papers, I would say, and take the papers which have been published in journals of good repute, not less than ACM, IEEE, or Springer, right? And in see, if we backtrack, if we go back to past 7 years, we will certainly find some papers in which practical implementation has been done for this kind of comparative analysis, inferences have been drawn, and some refinement has already been done, right? So what you can do now, on the basis of the refinement that has been done on the basis of comparison, you can conclude something for your research work. This is my suggestion to you, right?
Right, ma'am. I will definitely
yeah. So that you'll converge quickly on your work, because see, if even 7 years down the line or 8 years down the line, if we are only comparing the papers theoretically on the basis of voice activity detection, it's not going to work now. Why? Because it has already been done. People have been doing it over the years, right? तो अपने को क्या करना है, वहां से आगे का काम करना है, because we are in 2020, right? और लोग ये काम कर चुके हैं 2007 में, no, not in 7 I would say, yeah, but probably around 2012, 13, वो इस तरह के काम होने में आपको काफी पेपर्स मिलेंगे, right? तो उन्होंने वो काम करके उसमें क्या नया चीजें इंक्लूड करी, रिफाइनमेंट भी कर दिया, उनमें फिर क्या फ्यूचर स्कोप रहा, हमें वहां से लेना है काम, हमें यहाँ से नहीं लेना, बिल्कुल ग्राउंड लेवल से नहीं लेना, क्योंकि ये बिल्कुल ऑब्सोलीट हो चुका, उसके ऊपर हम काफी 5 साल काम कर चुके, राइट?
राइट।
तो अब आपका वर्क कंसिडर होगा 2020 से ऑनवर्ड्स। तो 2020 में क्या सिनेरियो है वॉइस एक्टिविटी डिटेक्शन को लेके, वो आप लें अपने वर्क में, राइट?
राइट मैम।
Satisfied?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for giving me such a knowledgeable information.
No, yeah. I hope it will work for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So, do you have anything else to ask or say?
Actually, ma'am, I have read many papers. No doubt it is like many research work has been done.
No, I'm
but
not
that is on the supervised data. So I'm going to work on unsupervised because noise is unpredictable. Right? So I'm going to work on that part.
So I would say even for that thing, like even for unsupervised data, a lot of work has been done, right? So you just consider only those papers in which such work has been done related with such type of data. So that's going to help you out, right? सिर्फ अब आपको उसमें से ही उठाना है. So this is good that आपने ये जो review किया उससे आप कम से कम कहीं पे converge हुए हो. So that's really good. तो एटलीस्ट हमने जो वर्क किया है वो वेस्ट नहीं है, हम उसमें से कुछ कंक्लूड करके ऑलरेडी ले आए हैं. सो प्लीज स्टिक टू दैट, और फिर उसके अंदर लोगों ने क्या रिफाइनमेंट करे हैं उसको आप कंसीडर कर लो, राइट? सो वी मस्ट स्टॉप हियर. या,
थैंक यू फॉर योर प्रेजेंटेशन शिल्पा मैम. You will get your digital certificate payment receipt thank you letter within 2 days. Further, we already forward to the Springer for publication process, and it will be live within 4 to 5 months. So I humble request you to kindly cooperate with us. And I also thank our session chair, Neha Tiwari.
Yeah, entirely my pleasure. Thanks for being a wonderful host. Thank you a lot.
for you.
So can we end the meeting now?
This is Purnima ma'am.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so
So
much. Hope I'll get it
small,
through email.
small token.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I got it. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, bye.